Hello and welcome. I'm David Wilson and this is Overdevest Nurseries. Thanks for joining us on a beautiful autumn day. The sun's shining, it's a lovely temperature. It's just great to be outside, and especially amongst all of these gorgeous plants. Now, if you've been watching our channel before, you'll have seen that we cover a lot of really interesting plants, including these wonderful hydrangeas. These are panicle hydrangeas, known botanically as Hydrangea paniculata. Now, here on the nursery, we're very fond of them because they're hardy, they're very reliable, they're easy to grow and look after. And if you've been viewing some of the other videos here on our channel, you'll see that they come in different shapes and forms and colors too. Ones like this beautiful variety here, which incidentally is called Hydrangea Worry-Free Ruby Snow. And today in this video, I'm going to take you into another part of the nursery, going to take you behind the scenes and let you see how we grow one of those varieties. In fact, it's a classic variety now that's very popular and widely planted throughout the whole of our mid-Atlantic and northeastern states. And when I think about it, probably throughout the whole of the United States, and as some of the comics in Ireland would tell you, throughout the world, and maybe even other places besides. So come with me now and I'll take you and show you this beautiful, very reliable and really just a classic variety. It's called Hydrangea paniculata and the variety is Limelight. And now that the sun's come out and the temperature's risen a bit, it's nice to be able to shed an outer layer. And incidentally, the hammering sound that you're hearing in the background is our guys preparing our houses to overwinter our plants. So if you hear hammering going on in the background, that's it. Now, getting back to Hydrangea Limelight, this is what it looks like. An absolutely gorgeous, nice, robust, strong growing tree that puts on lots of vigorous growth, these strong sturdy stems, and as you see from these flowers, when they come out first, they come out with a greenish shade, then go through to a creamy white shade, and then as they develop further, you'll see them take on a beautiful, brilliant, creamy alabaster white, and then as the temperatures decline and the days shorten going into the autumn time, they'll start to take on pink and even burgundy shades too. It's an excellent variety and one that we've been growing here for a long time. And you may have noticed from our other videos on the channel that we have them also in what we call our shrub form, where they grow with multiple stems coming out from the base of the plant. But these ones are a little different in that they're trained into what we call a tree form. Instead of having branches coming out from the base, we make a leg, and then that's where we form this rounded head on them, so they make brilliant, what I call little mini trees. Trees that will grow somewhere about 6 to 8 foot high, and perhaps eventually 8 or 10 foot, or perhaps even a little bigger than that if they're in really good ground conditions. The wonderful thing about this variety is that it, as well as being a robust, vigorous grower, it's also adaptable to soil conditions. It will grow very well in average garden soil and will actually tolerate soils that are on the heavier side, that have a clay content, through to loamy organic soils, through to sandy soils. Just avoid any sites that are particularly wet and sodden, and you'll find that under most circumstances this will grow away beautifully. It's a variety that was developed by the late Peter Zwijnenberg in his nursery in Boskoop in the Netherlands. He raised it first in 1986, and then, as you probably see from the tags, it was introduced by proven winners. And as you can see by these plants here, they're very free flowering, producing lots of these gorgeous big pyramidal flowers, conical shaped flowers that stand up and put on such an eye-catching display. It's a lovely plant to use as a single specimen. If you have a lawn area somewhere and you can't plant anything that's going to grow too big, then you might think about some of these, because there it will stand out and produce a beautiful shaped plant for that sort of use. And because the flowers are so bright and elegant, it will make a wonderful focal point too. So if there's a distant point somewhere in your garden that you kind of want to draw the eye out and create attention, then guess what? This would be really good for that. And of course, in beds and borders that might be a little on the flat side, you could have low ground covering shrubs or perennials or even roses, and you want to try and raise the profile a little bit to break it up and add height to that border, then of course one of these would be perfect, or even a group of 3 would be perfect for putting into that situation too. And it may be that you need some instant screening. Because these are already 6 foot or so high, you can see that by taking these and planting them in a line, or perhaps in a zigzag staggered pattern, you might be able to create a very nice screen. They are deciduous, so they won't have leaves on them during the winter time, but during the growing season, from say April on into November and perhaps even into December, you're going to have plenty of this solid foliage, which, as you see, would definitely provide valuable screening. And the other thing I should mention too is, if you look at these strong stems, they make wonderful cut flowers. So you could cut these and bring them in and put them in a vase. And the other thing we've discovered about them is that they dry very well too. So you can actually dry these and then of course be able to enjoy the flowers, the same flowers that is, for years and years. And as you see, they make wonderful subjects for growing in containers too. A beautiful well-shaped specimen like this that you could pick up at some of our partnering garden centres will bring a beautiful instant effect to courtyards and small intimate areas, to patios and decks and roof gardens, entranceways, just about anywhere where you're going to be able to enjoy this lovely shapely habit and beautiful pristine white flowers. Now you might be interested in knowing a little bit about how we produce our trees. This is what's known as a pot and pot system. If you look here, you'll see that the tree is actually growing in its own pot in a compost which is made primarily from recycled bark. And then this pot sits inside another pot which is a permanent, what we call a socket in the ground. So that means that when the tree's growing here, it's very stable. It also means that the roots inside the pot are nice and cool, and because it's fed by a trickle irrigation, this is the water that goes into it here, which comes out of a line which is underneath the ground. It's getting all the nutrient and moisture that it needs, because we use a slow release broad spectrum fertilizer in the compost, and all of that means is that the trees grow very well. So that's why we call this the pot and pot system. It actually was developed at the University of Minnesota by the professor there, Dr. Pellet, back in the 1980s, and at one point was known as the Minnesota system. But today it's generally known as the pot and pot system. But we also go one stage further in producing our trees. We have a material that's applied to the inside of the pots. It's a copper-based solution, which means that when the little roots grow out and touch the side of the pot, they actually form subroots, which then go out and make a very fine fibrous root system. That means that we don't get root spiraling, which happens sometimes with plants that are growing inside a pot. If you take a pot off and you sometimes see roots spreading around the base of the pot, that's why some of the gardening books and experts tell you that you should cut those roots and tease them apart. Well, with this system, that really doesn't happen, and it means that the tree, first of all, when you transplant it, gets away to a much quicker start, but then later in life, it's going to be much more stable. So we put a lot of effort, as you see, into producing our trees. We spare no expense, literally. If there's something we can do to make our trees a little better, then we do it, and then we worry about the expense later on. Now, the other advantages to you, as well as getting off to a good quick start, getting your tree to grow away well and be more stable later in life, is that when they're growing in these pots, as opposed to ones that are grown in the ground, you'll find that they are lighter and easier to move, and of course cleaner when you go to put it into your truck or car, or however you want to transport it home. And the other major advantage is that when you go along to the garden centre, you'll be able to transplant these quite literally any time during the planting season. That means from early spring through the early part of the summer, through the summer, and now into the autumn time, this lovely weather when it's perfect conditions for being outside and planting. It means that you will literally be able to take these and put them in the ground over a very long period. Now, because the shadows from the other trees make it a little hard to see, I've wrestled this plant out here because I want you to catch this and see how important the root system is on the trees. After all, this is the bit when you're buying a tree that you don't normally see, and yet, as well as a nice bushy well-shaped head and straight stem, it's probably the most important part. So let me see if I can knock the pot off here and let you see what I'm talking about. Take a look at this. Do you see all of this fine white fibrous root system on here that's all growing out here? When this tree goes into its planting position, and remember, we're going to be working in organic matter, we're going to be mixing that into the backfill and then watering it well, all of these fine white roots here are going to be growing out into that soil, and that's why the plants get off to such a quick start. Then simultaneously, as those roots grow out into the surrounding soil all the way around the plant, they will then spread out into the surrounding soil, and that's why the tree later on in life will be much more stable and grow up to be a beautiful specimen. That's why this fibrous root system is so important, and why it's great to not see any of the white spiraling roots that you sometimes see on trees that are grown without this technique. And that means that when it's planted, all of these roots are going to be simultaneously growing out into the surrounding soil, making sure that the tree is nice and sturdy. So then you have a tree like this with plenty of nice bushy, well-shaped head, a nice straight stem, and most importantly of all, a beautiful, stable root system. Now, there's another aspect to these trees that I should tell you about too, and that is the care and attention that our staff puts into growing all of our trees. Teo and Miguel are quite literally maestros at the art of shaping and forming our trees. They're constantly working, going out with their pruners, shaping and pruning and making sure that we not only have a bushy, solid head on them, but they're well shaped and evenly balanced all the way around the plant as well. Teo was telling me that he's been working at perfecting his pruning act for 30 odd years, would you believe. And they go through constantly not only shaping the plants and building this nice solid head on them, but also staging them to come into flower at different times. Which means that when you go along to our partnering garden centres, any time from when they begin to start flowering in July through to August, September, October, and even into November, you should be able to find some of these in flower so that you're able to see the magnificence of these varieties. Definitely well worth looking out for. This is David Wilson. Enjoy your gardening. It's good for us, and it's very good for our environment too.